Well, hello everybody. It's really nice to be here. My name is Dr. Brian Storz, and I'm a basin coordinator for Kentucky Division of Water. And my job ultimately boils down to getting communities that care about their local waterways in different ways. And one of the things we do is we work with communities to help them kind of build public green space and outdoor recreation in and out of their local waterway, which ultimately comes down to helping them kind of build a quality of life for their community. And this is a great time to be working in this area because we have many communities across the state of Kentucky that are really embracing this model of improving quality of life, especially focused on the local waterways. So we're getting a lot of traction. And I'll just tell you a little story, and this is really kind of what makes it all worth it, is I went and gave a presentation to the Craft Academy at Morehead State. And if you're not familiar with the Craft Academy, these are some of the top high school kids across the state. They go to Morehead State and they spend their junior and senior year of high school at Morehead State taking college classes. And then they go on to become to fairly prestigious academic institutions after that. And so I gave a presentation about what we were doing in Maysville and Manchester and Vanceburg and these communities that are really trying to improve quality of life and looking at a different focus for their community as far as the future. And I had two junior high school students that came up to me afterwards and said, you know, we always envision going off to med school or engineering school and then we'd go work in Louisville or Lexington or somewhere else. But hearing what they're doing in Manchester and hearing how our community is really trying to change and really grow and really try to think a way to keep that middle group at home and not moving out, it makes us really want to go home and become an engineer and become a medical doctor and then go home to Manchester, Kentucky and help our community grow. And so to hear that from the young adults or wanting to change their plans and actually go home to their communities and embrace that because of the work that we're doing to try to help communities build quality of life really makes it rewarding to hear that straight from their mouth. And so today I want to highlight Maysville, Kentucky. They've been really a leader at building quality of life for their community. And they were facing the same kind of situation where they had older people in the community and the younger people in the community, but that group in the middle was moving out. And so they really embrace this concept of improving quality of life within the community to keep that middle group there at home and not only keep them there, but then also grow that middle group. And so I want to first introduce our first speaker, who is not Mayor Cotterill, but Mayor Cotterill is actually filling into the weather. So Matt Wallingford is filling in for her today. So Matt, I would like you to talk a little bit about the mayor's vision for quality of life for City of Maysville and how you guys are bringing that forward.
Sure. And Brian, thanks for having me today and inviting the mayor. One of the things when she became mayor in 2021 after the untimely passing of her husband, her main vision was how can we as a city improve the quality of life for our citizens? And she wanted me to relay to the group that on the past two economic and industrial recruitment visits that we've had, she's participated in those visits with the company, and she wasn't getting questions on, well, how's your police protection? How's your fire protection? How are your roads in the city? She was getting questions on, how's your school system? How are the arts? How are your recreational amenities? Those were the questions she was getting. It wasn't about what we tend to think are needs, public safety, police, fire, roads, but really recreational and entertainment amenities that lead to a quality of life in order to have, to be able to have a place where people want to live, work, and play. So that has been one of her main goals. And, I've been with the city for 25 years now, and speaking in front of this group, when I first came in as a kid, fresh out of graduate school, one of the first people I got to work with that you're going to hear about on Hayeswood Hospital on that topic was Herb Pettigene. I'm sure many of you know Herb, probably worked with him. He was instrumental in getting me involved in the early days on Hayeswood Hospital and getting it remediated and rehabilitated. But our focus is what can we do to increase the quality of life, and one of those is that Brian has been passionate about is the Limestone Creek Restoration Project. And we've been focused on that. We were fortunate to have a group of students from what was originally called CEDIC, which is now Blueprint Kentucky. I know there's some individuals in the room from that organization who came to Maysville in the summer of '24 and essentially surveyed the entire downtown. They took into play current projects such as a $2.8 million riverfront project we're working on, $1.8 million sidewalk project through the Transportation Alternatives Program. They took all that into account, along with this restoration of Limestone Creek, and provided probably a 75, 80-page document that had maps that laid out what that restoration could look like for our citizens. And we're very thankful to have them. And again, Brian, thanks for having us today.
For sure. Highlighting our partners here too, if you're not familiar with our system of area development districts across the state of Kentucky, these are really the kind of drivers for a lot of improvements in quality of life for communities across the state. And so we have Kristie Dodge here from Buffalo Trace Area Development District. And Kristie, can you talk a little bit about what the area development districts do and specifically the work that you guys are doing for Maysville?
Sure, be glad to. So every county in the state of Kentucky belongs to an area development district. And I usually try to highlight that because if you're not sure who your area development district is, I promise that you do belong to one. The area development districts were formed in the late 1960s, early 70s as a form or as an extension of the local units of government. So the whole purpose of what we do at the AD district is to help our local units of government, SPGEs, water districts, utilities, a large variety of community service agencies to help better the community. They realized in the 60s and 70s that a lot of places in Kentucky are rural and they don't have the staff and they don't have the time and they don't have the ability to research for resources, grants, ways to develop projects, and then also to see those projects through. So that's kind of where the area development staff kind of come in. And most area development districts kind of fall under the same umbrella of trying to help the communities, whether that's with planning and development, which is the department that I'm the director of, to financing, might be revolving loan funds, workforce development for each of the counties, and then aging and disability services. So the AD is kind of the best hidden secret, as we like to think. So we try to kind of help. We go the direction that the cities and counties tell us. So for example, in this instance, when Maysville says, hey, we've got a need here, then we follow the lead of the city or the county, and we try to help them to identify what are resources or information that you need to make decisions so that you can move forward with trying to implement projects. Whether it's the FLAP grant, which is the riverfront restoration project, some of the flood mitigation projects that we have going on, recent flood pump that was replaced with CDBG funds. So we try to, really serve the area with trying to help them figure out, oh, this pot of money will help you to fix that, or this is what you need to go through. And then we try to kind of help them go through the hoops. Because I'm sure it's not a shock to anybody in here that state and federal funds have a lot of red tape. So you have to make sure that you guide the cities and counties through those processes. So their initiatives kind of become our initiatives, and then we try to kind of help them steer that direction and fulfill the needs so that they can improve the quality of life within the area and make it a better living place for all of the residents in their community.
Thank you, Kristie. Another partner they would like to highlight, and for most of our projects have to be from the ground up. The community really is ultimately the people that bring us in and really drive a lot of these projects. And we have Curtis Rosser here, who is a local champion, so we really look to a lot of these local champions that are like born and raised in the community. They know the people in the community to make connections, but they've also really got the time and energy and passion to move these projects forward. And Curtis Rosser has really been a champion of the environment for Mason County and Maysville, and he really recognizes that improvement in the environment, whether it's Limestone Creek or the surrounding area and stuff, has to be a huge part of this improving quality of life for the city. And so, Curtis, can you talk a little bit about your background and your interest in improving the environment?
Sure, appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. 36 years with the USDA Soil Conservation Service. With that background of working with individual landowners and city and county officials, it's not nothing new. USDA has been around for a number of years, but we're interested in the natural resources. And I think everyone who's present here today would say, hey, where I live, I enjoy the environment where I live. I mean, that's why we reside where we do, because we enjoy it. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. However, what I have found traversing the state of Kentucky with USDA is that there's problem areas. And a lot of times we get focused on all the good things and we kind of overlook, well, what are some of the issues that we're having? So my favorite thing to do when someone new comes on board, such as what Dr. Storz did, and he made the mistake of coming to Maysville. I don't know whether you did it on an invite or not, but I caught him in Maysville. And I said, Brian, let's just take a ride. And we got in a vehicle and we just went around Mason County, which is a beautiful county, but we do have some problems. And it's not to say that we have a magic bullet that can solve these problems, but I feel like that is where I come into play, is that let's identify it, and then let's look at what's in the toolbox. Who has that toolbox that maybe has something in there that can solve these issues? But overall, of course, we right on the border of the Ohio River. We get our drinking water from the Ohio River. We're divided with two major basins, the North Fork of Licking and the Ohio River. And I'm not going to go into any details about the good and the bad and the ugly. However, we all can do something within our environment to make it better. And that's where we are.
Agreed. So I'd like to transition to maybe talking about a couple of examples in Maysville about how they're working to improve quality of life for the community. And we have Kiersten O'Leary from the Brownfield program, and she's going to be talking about the Hayeswood Hospital, which is improving quality of life is not only environment, but it's a lot of infrastructure for the community. And can you talk about the Hayeswood Hospital project that you guys are doing there, and a little bit about Brownfield and how you work?
I'll provide some context to just brownfields in general first. For those that are unfamiliar, brownfields are properties that are either abandoned, blighted, or underutilized because of environmental contamination or even just the potential presence of contamination. So downtown buildings with lead and asbestos concerns, former industries and factories, former schools and hospitals, dry cleaners, all of those are examples of brownfields. And at the state level, through our program, we work very closely with local governments and area development districts to, one, educate about brownfield redevelopment, but also provide environmental site assessments at no cost to brownfield properties, and then also explore funding options for those sites that do need cleanup. There's funding options both at the state level and the federal level that we'll talk a little bit about today. But I often say that there's a lot of gray area in brownfields. It almost feels like when someone calls to inquire about a brownfield site that I play a game of 20 questions with them, because it's, who owns the property? How long have you owned the property? Who wants to buy the property? Did you do a phase one? But it's because all of those questions really matter a lot in this process. Navigating that gray area lends itself to a lot of flexibility and a lot of ways for us to get to a yes on these projects. And I will say that the former Hayeswood Hospital had a long history with our program, like you mentioned, Herb, our OG Brownfield coordinator. But it's probably one of my favorite projects that I've worked on so far, and it had a long road to yes. I don't know if you can tell from the pictures that were up on the slide. I'm sure they'll pull them back up. Yes, thank you. This building is absolutely massive. It's beautiful. It's over 65,000 square feet, 4 stories, kind of nestled into a hill in downtown Maysville. So all 3 sides of the front of that building are surrounded with residential housing. And the building has sat vacant since 1983 when the hospital closed. So it's been an attractive nuisance over the last several decades. I'm sure Kristie has some fun stories to tell about that. If you look it up on YouTube, there's plenty of ghost hunter videos, people trying to, figure out all the paranormal activity that may or may not be at the site. But the biggest barrier to redevelopment for Hayeswood Hospital has always been funding. I think even just, 10 years ago, like our first involvement with this project was a phase 1 that was completed back in 2006. And at that time, I think there was like over $1 million of remediation that needed to happen on the site. And at that time, the highest level of cleanup funding that you could get through EPA was $500,000. So it just was never feasible. Since that time and over several decades, both the city and the Area Development District have become very familiar with brownfields. Kristie's managed assessment grants and worked through our TBA program, Targeted Brownfield Assessment Program, to prioritize and identify these sites for redevelopment. But I think Hayeswood has always been at the forefront of all of our minds. How can we make Hayeswood happen? And after the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed in 2021, over $1.5 billion was injected into brownfields at the national level. And all of a sudden, Hayeswood Hospital was something that was like, okay, we can maybe do this thing. And conveniently, kind of around the same time, Frontier Housing, a nonprofit based out of Moorhead, were doing some projects in Mason County, and the Area Development District kind of took that first step and was like, hey, what do you think about the Hayeswood project? Is there something that we can make happen there? And thankfully, at that point, it was all systems go. We've been running on all cylinders ever since, Area Development District, completing environmental site assessments through us, Frontier Housing being ready and willing to kind of take the plunge and see it through. And that was in the first year that this historic level of funding that was available. They pulled together just an amazing application. These grant competitions are highly competitive at the national level. And Kristie and her team and the people at the city and Frontier Housing pulled together a $2 million grant application for the abatement of lead and asbestos in the building. And without that, this building could have sat vacant for another 4 decades. But I'm happy to say that the remediation is it's well on its way. The last I heard, they were completed with the third floor. They were kind of working their way down. Kristie may have a more recent update, but Frontier Housing has plans to turn this into a mixed-use residential development, which I think is really well suited for the area, the city that this is in. And I mentioned that this is one of my favorite projects to work on, and it's largely because of the partners and the people and the love that has gone into this project over the last several decades.
Sounds great. Thank you, Kiersten. So if you look on stage, you'll see, you've heard from the city, you've heard from the Area Development District, you've heard from the local community, and you've heard from the Brownfield and the state, and you'll see that there's one chair that's empty. And this is our federal partners that were not able to be here today for obvious reasons. And we decided to leave that chair empty and rather having it just filled with somebody, just to highlight how important our federal partners are and that they have a seat at the table for improving quality of life for our communities, whether it's USGS, National Weather Service, Army Corps. These different federal agencies are vital to these communities for doing this kind of work. And so I want to talk a little bit about what the Army Corps was planning for, is planning for the community. So if you can show the slide. So this is the restoration project for Limestone Creek. And if you're familiar with Limestone Creek, or even if you're not familiar with it, you should go take a look at it because it's heavily impounded. It doesn't, most of the year, it doesn't flow even into the Ohio. They have multiple fish kills a year. And the reason is because the infrastructure, the culvert system that was placed during the initial kind of flood control project and stuff are actually higher than the water level, which doesn't allow it to flow. And it's also the source of regular flooding in the city of Maysville and sediment buildup. And so the city, Buffalo Trace Ad, and myself worked together and approached first of all, Department of Transportation, and they immediately said, this is not us, this is not our infrastructure. We've done our due diligence and did our research. So then we went to the Army Corps and said, can you assist us with this? And so they came and took a look at it, and they said, you know, we have an 1135 authority where if our infrastructure is causing environmental problems like this, we can allocate up to $10 million to do a full restoration. In addition, not only restoration, but build public green space and everything for this community. And you can imagine how vital a project like this would be for the city of Maysville for quality of life. And this is where the mayor really said, you know, she looked at this illustration, which was done by the University of Kentucky Landscape Design Program, which they had a poster out yesterday in the poster session. And she said, this is what I've always wanted because I want my parents, you know, my moms and dads to be able to put their kid in a stroller and be able to go on a hiking trail somewhere along Limestone Creek there. She said, this is what we need, and this is really gonna improve quality of life for the city of Maysville. And so this is where the community comes into play too, because I don't know if you know how the Army Corps works, but you know, we always laugh, well, I would take an act of Congress to do X, Y, or Z. For the Army Corps of Engineers, it actually, in fact, takes 2 acts of Congress to make a project happen, right? They have an authorization and then an appropriation, right? So a project like this will sit in their queue at Army Corps Huntington, but until they get movement from Congress to fund it, it will just sit in the queue. And so this is where the community really has to get involved with kind of a grassroots movement to build momentum and work with their federal senators and representatives and stuff to work with Congress to move something like this through Congress to be able to get funding for that to happen. So this is to kind of highlight our federal partners and what they're doing and the vision that they're moving forward with for the city of Maysville. So to turn it back to our panel here, I had a couple of questions. First of all, I wanted to ask Kristie and Kiersten about various other projects that they're doing where they're working on quality of life with other communities across the state or in your particular county region.
Sure. So we actually serve 5 counties that are located in Northeast Kentucky. So within the 5 counties, and that's Bracken, Lewis, Fleming, Robertson, and Mason. I think I named 5, hopefully. Within those 5 counties, we've got several projects that are going on, and we assist in a wide array of things. So from water and sewer, we've got water and sewer lines that are being installed, applications that are in for improvements and infrastructure upgrades, wastewater treatment plants, water treatment plants. We also assist with transportation planning, with road surface projects. Matt had mentioned TAP program, which is funding sidewalks there in Maysville. We also have 2 or 3 other sidewalk projects within other counties, and we've done a lot of those, which improves ADA accessibility as well as just being able to connect from different areas of a city or a county from one place to the other. We aid a lot in community facilities, fire stations, and community centers. We just recently completed a project for renovation of a senior center because it was aged and needed a lot of repairs. We've also done senior housing that was owned by a county that we renovated 7 units so that those seniors living in those units can now live in a better environment with energy efficiency and such. I could sit here all day and kind of rattle through all of the different projects, but again, we kind of look to the cities and counties and help them to identify what are your needs, what are the things that you really need. What I can say is since COVID, outdoor recreation and tourism has kind of come to the top of the list. It's always kind of been eligible with some of the funding, but it's kind of always like a low-hanging fruit, I guess you would say. And now, since COVID, people are turned to that more, and it's kind of proven to be an economic driver for cities and counties. The amount of tourism and recreation that goes on and the support to the local economy, the small businesses and the shops and the dining, areas, restaurants, they make big when there's a lot of tourism that goes on in an area. So we've geared within the past few years to really take a look at that with cities and counties. We've got 3 of our 5 counties that are right on the Ohio River, so we're working with them really close to try to do river development. People that boat up and down the river all day long are always looking for places that they can stop and shop and dine. So yeah, we've got several projects that are going on and several that are in development phase. So we're just always looking for that next opportunity to try to help our local area to kind of improve.
Great.
And then I think one of the biggest things that we've been able to do with this kind of influx in funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law was facilitate a partnership between us and Blueprint Kentucky at the University of Kentucky, where we've been able to focus a lot on community engagement and kind of that direct technical assistance piece in specific communities across the Commonwealth that are dealing with brownfield challenges. So we've gone out and worked with communities through our Brownfield Community Assistance Program, just to, one, educate about brownfield redevelopment, but also figure out, okay, you've been burdened by these abandoned properties for, possibly decades. What would you like to see in these spaces, creating places for people and making sure that we keep open dialogue with the community and that redevelopment decisions are informed by the community. So we focused a lot on that over the last several years. And then I think, that gave us the confidence to go after a community-wide assessment grant at the national level for our state. And in that, we have secured $2 million for more assessments, more planning across the Commonwealth with 3 target areas in mind, and one of those being Maysville. And that partnership has been critical. And we've also focused on the city of Scottsville and an area in West Louisville, the Russell neighborhood in West Louisville. So, just that community engagement piece has been so important in just having community members inform the decisions that are being made in their communities and ways they go about, improving their own quality of life.
Excellent. Kiersten, we'll stay with you for a little bit. There's definitely a lot of interest in brownfields. First question is, how many brownfield sites are there total in the state? And the follow-up to that is, the funding cost the biggest issue for all brownfield sites being repurposed?
Oh gosh, okay. So in terms of the number of brownfield sites, I think there was an estimate, several years ago, but it's really impossible to know because it's sites that have maybe like a questionable past use, or there were building materials that were just common practice at the time that have now been, identified as a hazardous substance. So there's not a single inventory that's available for us to look at the available brownfield properties or just any brownfield properties across the state. So a lot of it is going into communities, doing windshield surveys. I think about a year ago when we were preparing for the assessment grant application in Maysville, Kristie and I and a couple of our team members were like riding around in a state vehicle, just driving around Maysville, like, what about that building? What about that building? What did that used to be? And it's so funny because Kristie is very familiar with brownfields compared to most of the people that I talk to. And she was like, I would have never thought about that building. like, I didn't think that that fit into what brownfields are. And the definition is so broad, which is nice because we have a lot more flexibility to be able to be helpful in the redevelopment of those sites. But I think it's impossible to put a number on it. But I will say that funding is largely the biggest barrier. Also, the size of the site. It's a very large contaminated site. You know, a lot goes into it. The size of the site, the type of contamination, you know, what the reuse is. That matters a lot when you're planning, because when you're going from industrial to industrial, there are certain institutional controls and engineering controls that you can possibly put in place to maybe not have any cleanup that's needed on the site, just to, you know, we're in the interest of protecting human health and the environment, and we don't want to be a barrier to redevelopment. So that's the biggest thing, is just kind of navigating it. It's site by site case.
Thank you. Question for Curtis. Are you still kind of the lone environmental warrior out there doing your thing, or you're able to kind of building some momentum and some assistance out there with kind of your focus on the environment?
Good question. That is, I think, one of my goals right now is to try to get people involved with their environment. And that is sometimes it's hard to do because we have, we look at our situations through rose-colored glasses. Sometimes I've already alluded to, we want to see the good things. Let's just talk about the Limestone Creek project for an example. I grew up in Maysville, and Limestone Creek always flooded. We always referred to it as backwater. We were thinking, maybe in my mind, limited knowledge, thinking that the Ohio River was just backing up into this area. It was always a place where you didn't really want to get into. However, once we started looking at it, we can go down there, and the map that he showed, we're at the tailwaters. It's right before you empty into the Ohio River. Well, what I try to get people to do, and I think this is where I got Brian, what about the watershed? What's going on above this area? And talking about the Brownfield, and I lived through the Maxey Flat situation over in Fleming County. And that same situation where, you know, gravity has a way of taking things downhill. So Maysville is at the base of a hill. So where is all this water going? And when it comes down into Limestone Creek, what's it carrying with it? What's going on in our watershed? So some of the pictures I showed or I sent shows me trying to educate. And I don't care where I go, it's trying to educate, especially the young folks. What's going on in your environment? Wherever you live, look around. Find out what your neighbors are doing. It's not the idea of being meddlesome, it's the idea of wanting to know. And pretty soon you begin to see these spots where maybe it's a roadside dump, maybe it's a place where someone has thrown out a bunch of tires. Anything of that nature can raise a flag. Again, it's not the idea we have that silver bullet, but again, if we could do a watershed plan and identify those areas, maybe, just maybe, we can clean up some of these areas and make a better environment for everybody. But education is the key. Trying to educate the public that, hey, we're all involved with this. One last thing, Brian, before I get off, is that when I go into the classroom or whenever I go into a facility or talking to a bunch of people, first thing I ask, where does your drinking water come from? And it's amazing with the 5th graders, the 8th graders, even high school students. Well, it's a water fountain. They're clueless about where their water comes from. So just become aware. Where does your drinking water come from? If you smell some odor in the air where you live, where's it coming from? What's going on? So it's just becoming aware and becoming involved.
Gotcha. Matt, a question for you. Where does the mayor and the city and all the people that you work with in the city council envision Maysville being in 10, 15 years? You know, what kind of like economy are you guys looking forward to? Like, what was your vision for the future?
Well, I will tell you, we have several projects, large projects, looking in the Maysville, Mason County area. And so, again, I go back to, for quality of life, if we're able to land, say, a 400 or 500, person plant or whatever, paying nice wages, we're going to need housing, and that's one thing that we've really failed to mention about Hayeswood, is that that's going to be affordable and attainable housing that the city needs, and every community needs it. But it's continuing to focus on those recreational amenities. One of the things I like to preach on back home is, we're very fortunate to have a Main Street district and a Main Street coordinator. Anybody who has one, your downtown is the heartbeat of your community. And we continue to funnel projects and money into our Main Street district, because everything that was shown on that map, as well as the projects that Kristie mentioned, the riverfront, they're all downtown. And so, we want more people to invest in our older historic buildings, put in a storefront, redo the upper floors for occupancy to draw people down there. I think we're going to see an expansion in the city. Both, we've been very flat population-wise for about the past 30 years. We've hovered right around 8,800, 9,000 people. But what a lot of folks may not understand is the city of Maysville is almost 22 square miles. It's very massive for the amount of people we have that actually live there. So, about half of the county, half the population of the county lives in the city limits. But I think we're going to see some growth. And so we've got to be planning on infrastructure, housing. But again, I keep going back to what the real needs are that people want in order to attract folks to your community are those recreational and entertainment amenities. We've got to have those. So, the Limestone Creek project is a big deal for us.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Kristie, since Matt brought up the Hayeswood Hospital again, there's a question that came in from the audience. Are there other funding sources being leveraged to redevelop Hayeswood Hospital after the environmental issues?
Yes. The site is really large, and so it was going to take a lot to clean it. So the EPA funds, as Kiersten had kind of highlighted too, it was the perfect storm. Finally had a partner that was willing to purchase and renovate the hospital into housing. The funding was right. Everybody was completely on board. So yes, speaking on behalf of Frontier, they do have intentions. They've actually secured an architect right now. They have got draft architectural designs for all 4 floors for 1-bedroom to 4-bedroom units. And they're taking a lot of feedback from the community. But they anticipate leveraging historic tax credits and low-income housing tax credits as well. And they've already got partners in line as well, I believe, with some private investment and then also with property management. So they're geared up and ready to go. They are just waiting for this to kind of finalize and the site to be cleaned, and they'll be ready to kind of move forward with everything.
That's great. That's great. This one goes out to the whole panel. There's a question that came in that said, what opportunities has the Ohio River Trail designation afforded communities like Maysville? This is open to anybody that's familiar with the Ohio River Way.
I will chime in and say that I feel like that once that designation, I believe it's Cora, came through the General Assembly, I think hopefully we will see more state and federal opportunities for funding. I think there's a project right now trying to do a bike trail all the way from, maybe it's Madison, all the way to Maysville, and then go south and over to Portsmouth. Does that sound right, Kristie?
Correct, yes.
Okay. It's a big deal for us.
Anybody else? I will just say that for you people that were here yesterday, they had the Ohio River Basin restoration group that spoke, and they were talking a little bit about this. And we, the state, are working quickly with the communities along the Ohio River, because we look at this Cora Trail that they're working on, the Ohio River, and the amount of traffic they're bringing in is an opportunity for these communities like a Vanceburg or a Garrison to really revitalize and improve quality of life and really kind of develop a tourism and economy. And we look at this Ohio River Trail that they're doing as almost kind of an anchor, right? So you have these groups that are bringing in people along the Ohio River. How can we actually attract them to come into Vanceburg or come into Maysville and come into Garrison? So it really opens up a unique opportunity for lots of communities along the Ohio River to be able to do that.
And Brian, I'll just add on real quick too, that it does help with, planning processes, to have this regional, statewide view of, how everything can be connected together. We're very aware of the projects that are going on within our 3 counties, but we don't always know what's going on in the next ad district as far as specifics. We know that they're planning with their cities and counties, and we know that they're also looking at riverfront improvements. But maybe something that we're doing in Lewis County may help benefit Greenup County, which is in the next area development district. So it's been nice to see this statewide effort that kind of brings everybody to the table and helps plan things out. I'm also all about, why create the wheel if I can steal someone else's idea and implement it into our area. So that helps a lot as well. So
For sure.
yeah.
And there's a lot of communities along the Ohio River, because they know that federal work is going on, that they're trying to get shovel-ready projects, as many as they can, to be ready if that money comes to fruition, that they don't lose out on the chance for revitalization of their community with that funding. I want to get back to Kiersten. There's another question that came in for you. It says, with the end of BIL funding, which you'll have to define that, in the near future, how will the program continue to assist communities with cleanup?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So we always knew that the bipartisan infrastructure law funding was for a limited amount of time, and we encouraged communities, throughout this 5-year span to take advantage of it while it's available. Speaking of, the last solicitation will be going out soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I think the highest level of cleanup that they have slated for this go around is $4 million. So really, we've focused a lot on education and, gearing up for bill funding and having communities take advantage of it while it's still here. But I think overall, the Brownfields program, came about because of the Superfund law that was passed in 1980. And there was such a fear of liability and cleanup costs when redeveloping these sites that a lot of sites just sat for a long time. And so the Brownfield law was passed in 2002. So I would say, it's still a relatively new program. It's garnered a lot of bipartisan support. And I think that, there a lot of traction has happened in the last 5 years, and we've been able to take advantage of, Hayeswood Hospital is a catalyst site for not only Maysville, but the state of Kentucky. We have several big profile projects in a lot of rural areas that have happened in our state as a result of this funding. And so I think that it can only help, when we're talking about potential, increases of funding. There's been talk at the national level in Congress of upping the cleanup amount from that $500,000 to $1 million. There's also, other states have state brownfield programs, state brownfield funding. So we're exploring a lot of options for continuing, maybe not this level of cleanup funding that we've had, but something better than what we had before.
Excellent. This is a question for Kristie, and I'll preface this by, I watched Kristie give a presentation on available funding for projects, and I've never seen something as comprehensive in my life. And not only comprehensive, but she said, as she would go down the list of all these different funding options, she'd be like, oh yeah, we've acquired this funding source 2 or 3 times, and we've acquired this one 2 or 3 times. So it was not only a great presentation on the available funding, but how the Area Development District was very successful at acquiring that funding. And this one goes to you, Kristie. Given that a lot of federal funding is drying up, how are you guys adjusting at the Area Development District?
That's a good question. And to Brian's point, comprehensive meant that I rattled a long time and he was trying not to fall asleep. No, I think partners, and looking for, we've kind of been through this before. There's always kind of this ebb and flow through different administrations with funding. And so we've kind of hit this before, and when the funding is, flowing, it's great, and we can't hit the ground running fast enough. And then as things kind of dry up, we look a lot to other resources. Foundation grants, there's a ton of foundation grants out there. So we try to kind of look back towards that as well. Partnerships, private funding. Hayeswood is a good example of that, where Frontier is being able to use federal funds and leverage that against private investment and historic tax credits. So just looking for those opportunities where you can kind of bring any other resources in. We also try to look at making the grants that we do apply for, because they will become more competitive, to make them the best applications that we possibly can. And a lot of time that stems back to hassling the people. And I've told agencies before, I'm not sure why you still answer the phone when you see Buffalo Trace ad calling, because it's me with another question. But hassle them and ask them things. Find out what makes a good application, and what you can do to gain those extra points to get that funding. Can match be used, as funds kind of dry up, and a lot of cities and counties are very limited financially. They're not able to provide cash match. So is there something that can be in lieu of that? So in-kind donations. Do you have county employees that could go out and do some of this work that you could count that towards? There's a lot of different things that you can look at to try to kind of fill in the gaps the best you can. It's not going to fill it in completely, but it may be of an assistance and help as much as possible. So,
yeah, and that's actually one of the reasons I really enjoy working with the people that are on the stage from Mason County and Maysville and stuff, because they really don't take no for an answer. Like from the Brownfield to the environment to the Area Development District bringing in funding to the city, is we come up with roadblocks all the time, and they are not going to take that roadblock as no. They take that roadblock as we got to figure out a path around it, and they've been very successful at that. And you can kind of, from hearing from Kristie's answer to that question stuff, you can kind of see that's the theme of Maysville and Mason County for projects. So I have one kind of final question for the panel, but before I want to do that, I want to see if there was any questions from the audience. All right, well, here's the final question for all of you. We'll just go down the line. And the question is, how can other communities replicate the work that's being done in Maysville?
Thanks, Brian. Well, for one, they need somebody like this who's sitting to my left, because she is absolutely phenomenal. I hope every ad district has a community development director like her, because without her, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. Kristie is a wealth of knowledge, and we're very glad that our ad is right in the middle of town, and unfortunately one of the buildings that we own, which we'd like to give to the ad district, but they won't take from us.
thanks, Matt. I'll give you that $20 later.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, it's partnerships. Having these partnerships with the ad and with the county. 120 counties. How many of those 120 counties get along with their largest city in their county? We do. We get along. We have a great relationship with our county. We probably have 9 to 10 interlocal agreements. We have 17 volunteer boards and commissions for people to serve on. So it's those partnerships that really have made Maysville and Mason County a great place to live, work, and play. And other communities can do it. They can do it. And I think Kristie made a good point. R&D, rip off and duplicate. I mean, just do it. And and we've done that, and we'll continue to do it.
And honestly, I've heard that from many communities along the Ohio River. They say the same thing as like, look at what Maysville's doing. How can we do that? So this is really a question that's being asked pretty regularly by other communities that are trying to figure out how to improve quality of life and economic development and tourism and outdoor recreation for their community. So go ahead, Kristie. How can other communities do this?
I think a variety of things. Playing on the partnerships, definitely, collaboration. Bring everybody to the table that you can, because something that you're not thinking about, somebody else may be thinking, or they might ask the question that you didn't even occur to you. The funny thing about Hayeswood, and I know the mayor loves to tell the story, is that there was the city, the ad, and Frontier sitting around the table when we were talking about housing opportunities in the area. And, the Hayeswood Hospital had been a focal point for, 30, 40 years. Mm-hmm. And the executive director at the time was Amy Kennedy, and she looked across at to Tom Manning at Frontier and said, what about Hayeswood? And we all started laughing. Yeah, we all laughed, and we were like, yeah, right. And then we slowly stopped laughing and started looking at each other, and we're like, well, what about Hayeswood? And that's kind of what kicked it off and started it. So, having those people around the table and just pitching out ideas, even if they seem crazy in the moment, is a way of, and expressing ideas and identifying resources as well as needs. It's easy to identify, what the needs are. Sometimes it's harder to identify the resources, but the more people that you pull in, then the better that you can do with, trying to identify who can do what in this problem. And then giving everybody their marching orders, and try not to give duplicate marching orders, or then you have people tripping over each other. But planning even on a regional level, and I'm trying not to take too much time, our transportation and water and sewer projects is a really good example of this. There may be limited funds, and that's becoming even more of a challenge. But when you can pull together 5 counties and they work together, all the cities and counties, and they can sit at a table and say, we understand that this project is really important for our particular city, but we understand on a regional level that this is what, may be more important. And then we can focus our resources onto that. So I think prioritizing things to try to kind of figure out, what is the most important. Because a development that goes on in an industrial park in a neighboring county is probably still going to benefit your county. Even if it doesn't land directly where you're at, there's going to be trickle effects to every benefit that goes on that's close to you. So I think having that broad sense and bringing people together to have that cooperation is really important.
I feel like that's kind of deja vu when we were talking about Limestone Creek, because we were in conversation about Limestone Creek, what can we do with this? And it was like everybody is such a mess and stuff. Most people were looking at each other like, what can we do with this? And it wasn't until the mayor actually stepped up and said, we've had our back to this creek for too long, and it's time for us to turn around and face it. And I feel like that galvanized everybody to start putting together a plan of how to actually do something with this Limestone Creek and return it to closer to its natural state and really invest in it. So Kirby, the same question to you. How can communities replicate what you guys are doing in Maysville?
Partnership. I've heard it across the board, and I'll just resound it again. Don't take no. If you see an issue or know of an issue, talk to people. Communication is the key, and reach out to individuals. I had the opportunity to speak with Jay Nelson right before I came up here on stage. Federal funds are drying up, and so we're looking at where can we get the funding. And throughout my career, it was always federal funding. I worked for the federal government, and taking those federal funds and working with individual landowners and solving resource problems. So where are we going to start looking at now? But the key, I think, is let's not get too lax and recognize how valuable our environment is to all of us. And if, I'm toward the end of this whole game, but what about the next generation? What are we going to leave our children? And I think that's the question we can continue to ask. But this partnership, talking to people and finding out what's the best solution.
Great. Kiersten, you have the last word.
Okay. So I liked what you said at the very beginning about tools in the toolbox and identifying tools in the tool. I feel like I'm a tool in the toolbox. The Brownfield program is a tool in the toolbox. It's not always going to fit And it's not going to take care of the entirety of your project, but it is an important tool. And so I think the most important thing is knowing the tools in your toolbox, what's available to you. Also keeping a consistent line of communication open with the people that have the tools, right? Because I've developed a lot of relationships in this role. And, you know, when the opportunity came up for the community-wide assessment grant, we had already identified, you know, you all had already put together such an amazing application, already secured funding for Hayeswood. We knew that that was going to be a catalytic project. And so, you know, it was easy to say, okay, Maysville should be a target area because I know the people that I'm working with, that will continue to work with and help and assist with, you know, a lot of other properties that are in Maysville that could benefit from that redevelopment that's going to be happening over the next, you know, 20, 30 years. So knowing the tools in your toolbox and making connections with those people that have those resources, I think is really important.
Thank you very much. I will say this all the time. I say this to people that ask me about my job all the time, is I have one of the best jobs in state government because I get to work with people like these in a partnership, and we get to do things that are much bigger than all of us individually and really kind of help these communities in Kentucky with our partnerships and the work we do. And we really appreciate the state government, we appreciate the federal government, and we appreciate our local partners and everybody that's working to do this, because this is all much bigger than ourselves, and it is impossible to do anything like this without these kind of partnerships. And thank you very much for listening to Maysville, and hopefully we'll be back with another community next year.